Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 102 of the Backmarkers F1 Show podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be recapping the 2021 Bahrain Grand Prix, and what a race it was. We got so many things to talk about today. I'm super pumped and excited to do this episode with you guys. Just before I bring on my fellow backmarkers, just a quick reminder that this podcast is sponsored by the GP Box. You can find the links in the description below to get some exclusive discount offers from our friends at the GP Box. They sell some awesome F1 merchandise, F1 memorabilia, and some used car parts as well, which are really, really cool. So after you're done watching this podcast, or before, if you want to do right now, just check out the links in the description, and you'll be able to get a gift for yourself or a friend who's an F1 fan. All right, so let me bring in my two fellow co-hosts for today's episode. Coming in from Ottawa as well, Tyler McDonald. Tyler, welcome to the Backmarkers F1 Show, episode 102. How are you today?
Howdy. Yeah, no, not too bad. It's great to be back here for the podcast. And what an exciting race to start the season. I mean, it was nice to have something in terms of a close battle between the top two and Hamilton and Verstappen throughout the race, and an exciting finish, a controversial one, maybe you could say. But no, great start to the season, and we'll see what the next 22 races have in store.
Absolutely. And also for the first time this season on the Backmarkers F1 Show podcast. We saw him a couple weeks ago on the live stream, but he is back with us tonight. Full house. We got Shaker Barty as well, in the middle of a move, but he's still committed. So welcome on, Shaker.
Hey guys, how's it going? Very exciting race that we had here. My house is very empty at the moment, but yes, very excited.
No, great to have you back on. And yeah, let's dive right into it and speak about the 2021 Bahrain Grand Prix, race 1 of 23, hopefully. And let me start off with it, and then you guys can pick up from here. I wanted to first talk about Sergio Perez, who Sergio was voted driver of the day in the end by all the fans, and I think deservedly so. But I wanted to talk about Perez because I was honestly absolutely shocked after qualifying. Tyler, you and I were live on our channel, which was a very great live stream. Thanks everybody who tuned in on that. But I was incredibly almost shocked and kind of just dismayed by all of the heat and the criticism that was being thrown against Sergio Perez for not reaching Q2. I mean, there was some people talking about, this was a mistake by Red Bull, putting Perez in the seat, bring Albon back. I mean, I was shocked, considering some of these fans were the exact same ones to say, Red Bull, they're too harsh on their drivers. They need to take their time with them. And here we are in the first qualifying session, and they already want the guy fired. But I think Sergio Perez absolutely silenced all of his haters and all of his critics. What an incredible drive that was, basically to be parked on the side of the track on the formation lap, starting from the pit lane to go to P5. Perez, in my opinion, was just absolutely stellar. I'm curious to know what you guys think, but I was a little pissed off with all the criticism and the hate Perez was getting because I think it was unfounded.
Absolutely. I mean, I was listening to Perez post-race, and he said he was very close to getting out of the car and just saying, race is over. But his engineer, he said he listened to his engineer and he got the car back fired up. And I mean, yeah, like you said, Chris, started in the pit lane and all the way up to P5, a fantastic finish from him. And in his post-race radio message, you could tell he was frustrated, but was very grateful considering just how the race started for them. And not ideal for Sergio, but the fact people were calling for his throat pretty much after the not getting to Q3 when it was his team's fault, not his fault that he didn't make it into Q3, was a little bit ridiculous. So it's nice to see him silence all the haters there, and I'm sure we'll have a strong next few races coming up for Sergio.
Yeah, no, I was really surprised, like right after qualifying and free practice and everything. And I think, with the amount of time that Albon and Gasly was given to say after just qualifying and, practice, to say that they should already bring Albon back is a little bit ridiculous. Guys,
a little bit.
Had one race yet. And the one race he does have, he goes from the pit lane to, fifth place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess he just shut down all of his haters is all I can say. So,
yeah, couldn't agree with you more too. And I couldn't understand it because, like you mentioned, Tyler, and I mentioned this on the live stream as well, that if Red Bull would have put Perez out on the soft tire, he most likely would have qualified obviously into Q3. And I think that it was a mistake from Red Bull because you have a driver who is in your first weekend with the team, first qualifying session with the team. Everybody knows that he's not yet comfortable with the RB16B just overall, but especially in terms of qualifying pace. So why not send him out on the softs? You got him on an alternate strategy against the two Mercs and Red Bull with Verstappen, who started on the medium, and you just play it safe for the first race of the season. So I think they made a mistake in that regard, because you saw McLaren did the same thing, because they knew that the pace from the Ferraris, for example, the AlphaTauris, were going to be really strong to get into Q3. So yeah, I think that Red Bull kind of made it a bit harder for him there, but like you mentioned, Tyler, he was super calm on the team radio as well. His race engineer and the technical staff at Red Bull were super impressed, because he actually lost radio at some point when the car just shut off. And he was smart enough to have the wherewithal to just reboot the system really by himself. Yeah. So very, very impressive from Sergio Perez. I think he's going to be fantastic for Red Bull this season. And this race is a perfect example of, once Perez gets up to speed, which I think that next race in Imola, we're already going to see him in the top 5. What a difference he's going to make in the fight against Mercedes and helping Verstappen as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this 3-week break is actually going to be very beneficial to Red Bull, because we already have seen what their car can do in this first race, and kind of figuring out the little kinks in their car, the car shutting off right before the lap. definitely help them out in the long run. And especially I think we're expecting to see a different Red Bull this year from what we've seen before. Before it's been trying to catch up to Mercedes, and now that we see they're kind of on par, it's going to take a little bit of time to develop different strategies and such like that. New team, all that comes into it. So yeah, no, I agree. I think we're going to be seeing a lot from Perez and Red Bull in general from this year. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens going into Imola, because I don't want Sergio to get any kind of not bad luck, but get hard on himself for what happened in Bahrain, because really none of it was his fault. And I'd like to see him come back strong in Imola, and the whole Red Bull team to come back strong, and even maybe put the strategy into Sergio's favor, and that way kind of boost his confidence a little bit, gets him more comfortable with the Red Bull, and really have a nice transition period for Sergio there. That way, he doesn't feel like he's either the odd man out, or the strategy doesn't go in his way all the time like it does, with Mercedes in their situation, where Hamilton always gets the favorable strategy and Bottas is always the odd man out. It's so noticeable, and that's what you don't want to happen. You want a good team dynamic. And if they can get that good teamwork going with Perez and with Verstappen, I think you could really see them take over Mercedes, because their dynamic isn't as I would say meshed together as it is with what Red Bulls could be.
Right, and you see that the way Perez was able to storm through the field in the RB16B, that it's confirmation that the car is very good this season. And certainly we don't know yet whether it's the best car, but it's definitely on par with both Mercedes, the W12 at the moment. So I think that he'll come into play really, really strong. And you bring up an excellent point. That team dynamic will be very interesting, because if Perez is going to be extremely competitive, which I expect him to be, then we might see him get sometimes the Bottas strategy and the malfunctioning wheel gun, shall we say? the Bottas specialty in Bahrain. Maybe he'll get a couple of those. I don't know. But yeah, I'm very excited to see what he can do, and super happy with his performance. So I just wanted to get that out of the way, because I think that some of that criticism to me was just absolutely ridiculous for the first qualifying session of the year. I mean, we always want to jump the gun a little bit too much when we're F1 fans, but I think that was just a little bit too much. So yeah, go ahead, Shaker.
The last thing I am very excited to see this year with Perez is seeing more of this fight between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, because he is going to be that middle guy that's going to be fighting it out between Bottas and Charles Leclerc and, Lando Norris and all these drivers. So I'm excited to see more of this fight between Max and Lewis leading up to what Sergio Perez is going to do as well.
100%. He'll be a big factor in this championship fight for sure. And we're going to touch on, obviously, the big Verstappen-Hamilton battle in just a minute. I just wanted to kind of go a little bit more chronologically in order and talk about essentially what was the race start. And let's talk about the elephant in the room, which was obviously Haas and Nikita Mazepin. And Mazepin.
No.
I think his name is officially Mazepin now.
I was going to mention it. That's what I was going to say, Shaker. It's not Mazepin. It's Mazepin now.
I didn't want to go there, but you did, so it's good.
I think it's just official. You can't just, do it in qualifying and then, have the perfect name for it and then just not be called Mazepin for the rest of the season. So
Yeah, someone's got to play the spin balla because I think we have a new spin balla.
It fits, doesn't it? Though, like
It,
Mazepin, like
it's perfect. It's perfect.
I'll tell you what. I mean, I'm not defending him because let's be honest, guys. It was a pretty awful weekend for him because that wasn't his first spin. It was a series of
Third?
spins. More.
So it's more, yeah, more than
there
three.
was one in almost every session of some sort, not to
Yeah.
that extreme, but I think there was one in almost every session.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, like, if we're being fair, and this is the point that I want to talk about, because we can apply the same Perez logic in a way to Mazepin as well, to say that it's his first race. I'm not going to crush the guy just yet. let's give him a couple races to see what he's capable of. I don't know him that much. I wasn't that familiar with him in his junior Formula days, so I'm still going to wait. Let's give him some time. We all know that Haas car is very tricky to drive because Mick also had a spin as well. So if we're going to be honest here, then we have to...
No. We can't talk about how the golden boy Mick Schumacher had a spin and how the man who shouldn't be in F1 in my opinion had a spin as well. We two different standards. So just pick on Mazepin.
Yeah. Well,
Mazepin is not of a different legend. So I mean, it's just different. So built different.
Yeah. Mick Schumacher is the golden boy, though. I think we'll all agree with that. But
yeah, but he is also like the nicest guy on the paddock.
yeah, he's brilliant, isn't he? I mean, it was great to see his debut. He had an okay debut. It was a decent race for him. But at any rate, I just wanted to make that quick note out there. But I think after race 2 or 3, if we're still seeing one spin per practice session, then I think we can officially anoint him Mazepin for the rest of the year.
But
you know what? With Haas, I think I'm not saying we're going to see more of that, but I think we're definitely going to see more of a development into their performance throughout them just settling right in, It
was on the curb, and I don't know if he was just laying a little too much throttle down or what. But his engineer said, it's like, no worries, there's lots to learn. And, that's going to be the case for Tsunoda. It's the same case for Mick and same case for Mazepin as well. It's going to be a big learning experience. It's their first race of the year. I mean, we saw all 3 rookies make a mistake. Schumacher spun, and Yuki really did not have a good first lap. He even started lined up in the wrong grid position, had to back up into the right grid position.
I thought you couldn't move your vehicle once you were in position. Like I think
no, but I guess
he was in the wrong one, right?
He was in the wrong one, yes. Yeah, so because Sergio wasn't there, so he was just going to Sergio's spot, then realized halfway, and that he was like, oh, that's too far, and backed up into his regular spot, which is fine. But so everyone making a mistake, but I mean that's what it is. First races of their young careers.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And speaking of mistakes, sort of on the start of the race or at the beginning, we have to go to Sebastian Vettel. And we all have the F1 TV Pro subscription, which has been pretty brilliant so far. And we get to watch all the onboards, of course. And I'm going to just share my screen here with you guys because obviously I don't think a lot of people would have noticed this, but I just found it to be quite hilarious. And I don't know if this was intentional or if Seb just forgot something here, but hold on, let me just... So this was Seb at the race start. Obviously, he was starting 20th because of the penalty for ignoring the yellow flags the day before in qualifying. And so he lines up to the grid here. And it's very interesting because I don't know if he forgot that he was starting 20th, but he only engaged the clutch and built his revs almost at the 5th light. So pay attention to the lights.
Jeez.
So he almost didn't even get... I mean, I don't know, he was just all rushed, but I mean, it was an amazing start.
Yeah, he just blew the Haas out of the water there.
And it continues here because he sends it on the inside of the Alpine here of Ocon. And then he gets an excellent run here on Tsunoda as well going into turn 4. A little bit of contact, but as he says later on that he didn't have any front wing damage.
I mean, you guys forget that he's used to the slow speed of a Ferrari of last year. So
that's right.
Yeah.
That acceleration isn't he's not used to it.
Yeah, exactly. So I just found it hilarious. I was laughing yesterday because, yeah, like literally you could see him in that video too. He's just focusing on his steering wheel. he's trying to get adjusted there and maybe, get himself into the race modes and everything. And then he just it's almost like he forgets, like, oh shit, I'm starting 20th. Like, I need to go.
I wonder if anyone's asked him that question, or if maybe it'll get answered next weekend. So I'd like to see if he actually did that, or if he's just like, no problem, I'm ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, it was excellent quick reactions because like it was right away, he hit whatever the rev limits are, and then he went for it. But still, I was like, it's very late. I mean, it's fourth light essentially going on to the fifth light, and that's only when he's building up the revs.
Yeah, I mean, he is a 4-time world champion, so if anyone can really get away with those quick reactions, I mean, it's going to be Sebastian Vettel, who, I mean, had a decent race in my opinion as well, other than the, I guess, the lockup and hit into Ocon, but he apologized to Ocon right after the race, so nice guy, Vettel.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think he said, I don't know if you guys heard it, I was watching the team radios earlier today, that apparently when he went into that line, Ocon changed lines.
He did not. Ocon did not move one inch.
I just saw. No? Okay.
Yeah, Ocon didn't move an inch. I don't know what I think happened is that once Ocon passed him, Vettel tucked in behind Ocon. So if anyone changed lines, it was Vettel. He tucked behind Ocon, and I think he lost front downforce on the brakes, and that's why he locked up and hit Ocon. But anyways, he went right up to Ocon after the race and apologized right away before Ocon was even out of the car. So
yes, I did see that.
Tell you what it reminded me of, or what it looked like almost a carbon copy, was when he hit Verstappen the same way in Silverstone.
That's what I said. I was just saying, I'm like, sounds like a certain Verstappen incident from was it 2 years ago now?
2 years, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so yeah, very similar to that one.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. Another thing is that he now has 5 penalty points from this weekend on his license, so not ideal from Sebastian. 2 for the Ocon incident and 3 for ignoring yellow flags during qualifying. So it's been a penalty, lots of penalties given throughout the weekend for Sebastian.
Yeah, he had 0 when he started the weekend. So
yeah,
man.
I guess with that in mind, Sergio Perez definitely had a better start than his counterpart that joined Aston Martin.
Oh, 100%. And I just want to make a quick comment on Vettel. Again, here's another driver everybody loves to pile on, right? He's been kind of the favorite one the last couple of years. It's no secret that he's my favorite driver, so maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but I still got faith for him this season. I still think that he had, like you said, Tyler, he had a decent race. When we looked at that start there, he had some good battles with Fernando Alonso. He seemed more comfortable with the car than he did with the Ferrari last season. We didn't really see him that racy in 2021, so that's a positive. Now that move against Ocon, those are the weird ones that I can't necessarily explain of what's going on and why he's doing some of those moves. And I know David Coulthard made some comments after that team radio that you guys are talking about that Seb was delusional, which I think that's a little bit too much. I just think it's a driver in the heat of the moment. He said the exact same thing with the Verstappen incident, and then he went and did the same thing after the race and apologized. He knew he was wrong in the heat of the moment. It's just, that's how it comes off for these drivers. So delusional is a little extreme, but I still got faith in Vettel, and I still think that he's going to have a better year. Let's just give him a couple of races to adjust to this car.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that you could notice that he wasn't fully comfortable with the brakes maybe to start things off with in the Aston Martin. It's still his first race. So jumping into a new car, he's only done it 2 times before, jumping into the Red Bull, and even then it was a sister car, and then going to the Ferrari. So it's learning a lot of new things for Sebastian, but he's a 4-time world champion. I have a lot of belief in him, and I think he's going to have a fantastic year, along with Stroll, once they get some of those kinks figured out at Aston Martin.
Yeah. And we all know the capabilities of that car. I mean, Lance Stroll had a fantastic weekend overall. So we know the capabilities of the car. It's there. I think, like you guys said, it's just going to take Vettel a little bit of time to settle in and get used to his new team. Everything's different. He was with that team for 6 years? 5 years?
That's right. 6.
Yeah, long.
Yeah. So it's going to be, it's definitely going to be an adjustment, So yeah.
You saw...
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, you saw all drivers at their new teams struggle. I mean, Ricciardo, he had a decent race, had a solid race for McLaren, but that's not the best Ricciardo that we've ever seen. And we know it's going to take him a couple races to adjust. So same thing with Perez, with that argument, again, that we talked about at the beginning of this podcast. It's
same with Carlos.
Same with Carlos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Ferrari too, because they impressed me. Thankfully, I was kind of beating them down before in our live stream, but they ended up delivering. But I 100% agree with you guys that let's give them a little bit of time to adjust. I feel that by race 4 or 5, you're going to see a little bit different. With Aston Martin, I think it's a little bit difficult because it seems like the new regulations have hurt them a little bit more than, let's say, their rivals over at McLaren, and so I think it's going to be a bit harder for them. But another of their rivals, Alpine in the midfield, what would it be? What would a Formula One return be if not for a Fernando Alonso retirement? It really, truly felt like the sport was back, wasn't it?
Man, that guy has no luck, eh? Like, it doesn't matter what team he goes to; it's just retirement city. No, but he actually had a decent race going, before that. Obviously, for some reason, he couldn't get past Vettel on old tires. I don't know what it was there, but it was just, I don't know if it was Vettel's calm head, but he just seemed to put his car in the right place and was very good at countering whenever Alonso passed him. But that was a fantastic battle watching those two in Sainz. I had a lot of enjoyment watching that. The kind of the young stud and two of his idols growing up battling out together.
Yeah, it was like looking at 2 careers Ferrari ruined and 1 future one though ruined.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's accurate actually.
But yeah, I mean, overall, I think Charles Leclerc said the best at the end of qualifying. It's not what they expected to be. It's much better than what they had last year, and overall, it's kudos to them, kudos to the team for doing what they can and getting that car to what it can do, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, Shaker. Where it's not as good as where they want to be, but yeah, at least it's way better. I think they were the car that lost the least amount of time over the rule changes over the winter so far, which, I mean, I guess is very good damage control from Ferrari. So if they can keep it that way, that would be great. But I think I predicted in our live stream, Chris, that Ferrari would get 2 cars in the points. So I
You got it.
somehow managed to get that bold prediction right.
They did very well, and yeah, they improved the most in their qualifying pace versus last year. Interestingly,
And they didn't screw up their strategy.
No, pit stop was good too.
Who would have thought?
And I'll tell you what, I love this dynamic so far at Ferrari of Sainz and Leclerc, because how good was Carlos Sainz all the way up until essentially Q3 when Charles Leclerc pulled out another exceptional lap. But I love the fact that Sainz is making Leclerc a better driver and that Leclerc is stepping his game up to match Sainz, because Carlos had a very good opening session to the weekend and following as well. So I think that they're going to really push each other. I still think it might get a little bit spicy in the midseason if they come together on track, but I really like that dynamic so far at Ferrari, and it seems like they definitely have improved on what was a dismal 2020 season. So that midfield battle is going to be incredibly close, but definitely double points finish for Ferrari, I think, was really solid. Okay, so let's get right into the main event and what was one thing that we were hoping for and we were expecting for this season, which is Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton, toe-to-toe on track, and hopefully the first of many in this season. And obviously it wasn't without controversy, thanks to our good friends at the FIA once again. I put the video out.
My God.
Yeah, I put one video out today, and I was going back and forth with you, Tyler, and with Shaker as well, because honestly, I was so confused. I had no idea which direction to go with this video, because my first initial reaction was Max shouldn't have given the position back and should have just dealt with the penalty. But then reading the comments from Christian Horner, he said that they could have gotten a stiffer penalty and that it came directly from the race director's notes. Then I start to research more into the regulations and what they say exactly, what the race director's notes was, and I was just so confused as to what am I going to say? What do I really think about this incident? And I just basically took that emotion of confusion to say, what the hell, FIA? I mean, if I'm this confused, I can't imagine what some of the newer fans are. So let me get your guys' thoughts on it, and what are your reactions to, first of all, the overtake outside on turn 4, and just the whole track limits debacle, and then we'll get more into the important stuff, which is Verstappen and Hamilton.
Sorry, I thought you were going Shaker.
Go ahead, Tyler.
No, first off, man, the FIA really dropped the ball in this. This all could have been avoided. I wanted to save this for the podcast, and when you're texting saying, you know, what's your opinion, Tyler said it's neither the driver's fault or the team's fault. It's the FIA's fault. And that's because they put this whole scrutiny on turn four during the practices, during qualifying, all the laps would be deleted. But for some reason in the race, they decided, oh, you know what? Actually, go ahead and track extend in turn 4. So the teams, Lewis and Valtteri, were saying, you know what? Well, they're not going to tell us. We'll do it. So they were the only 2 cars track extending in turn 4 for the first 20 laps. And then, you know, Max finally got the message saying, hey, Mercedes are track extending in turn 4. Like, let's do the same until we're told not to. And I would say probably 5-10 laps after that, all of a sudden the FIA are like, whoa, no, you can't go wide in turn 4 anymore. We're going to start giving you penalties. And that's when you heard Lewis be like, I thought this was legal. Like, what? Like, I don't understand why all of a sudden it's not legal mid-race. Which, hey, I don't get it either, Lewis. Doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how you can change a track limit midway through your race. So, I mean, that really infuriates me. And I was listening to Martin Brundle, and I think he hit it spot on. The track limits are the white lines, not the curbs, not the outside of the curbs. They're the white lines. I don't know how hard it is not to make it clear that the white lines are the track. And that, you know, I don't know how that's not. I was looking through the whole sporting regulation. There is not one article in that sporting regulation that I could find that dedicated something to track limits or to what a track limit is. There's nothing. And if someone can find a sporting regulation that does say it, please send it or leave in the comments, because I didn't see anything, and that's a long document. So, I mean, can we I'm so frustrated.
Yeah.
Because it ruined a really good race. It ruined what could have been a fantastic finish between Verstappen and Hamilton. Now it just leads to controversy, and we can't appreciate the fantastic battle that those 2 drivers had.
I think the track limits is what the FIA decides.
It is. It is, which is ridiculous in my opinion.
It is absolutely ridiculous, because I agree the track limits should be the white lines. If you're keeping at least a millimeter or whatever you can on that white line, it should count as a track limit. If you're over, you're off the track and you should lose time or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if they are going to enforce the rules, why wasn't whoever, not just the one person, whoever went over the track limit, why weren't they given a time penalty for each time they went over? You know, like that should have been taken into account and then put in overall at the end. If they are really going to enforce the track limits that much, not halfway through, because it doesn't make any sense for them to do that halfway through the race. And
well, like Lewis got a message being like, hey, if we go over one more time, we'll get the black and white flag. He's like, what do you mean if we go over one more time? Like, we've been doing this the whole race. Why is it like a big deal now? So they were going to start all of a sudden handing out penalties for it. And it's like, no, like you can't just start handing out penalties for something that you decided you can change midway through the race. There's actually, I was watching NASCAR, they were on dirt earlier today, and there's actually a rule in the NASCAR rule book that says NASCAR can change any rule during the middle of the race when it has to do for the good of NASCAR. That's basically what that rule says. And like that should be in the sporting regulation for the FIA apparently, because I mean, they all of a sudden changing all these rules for no reason.
Yeah, and here's where it gets worse, which is the worst part, Tyler. You mentioned the regulation. So I dived into it yesterday because I wanted to, you know.
Did you find anything?
Yeah, so this is what's interesting.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay, great.
It doesn't necessarily address what the track limits are because, like you said, I mean, they change it like it's a pair of socks depending on which track we go to. But in the Bahrain race director's notes, so on Friday after FP1, if people don't know the timeline, they said that, okay, we're not going to enforce track limits for individual lap time set during free practice or qualifying. Okay, seems pretty simple enough. Or sorry, excuse me. Let me restart that. They said that they will enforce track limits after FP1 for obviously the 2 practice sessions and then qualifying, meaning if you go outside the white lines and the curb, your lap will be deleted. Now, below that, it says for the race, drivers are reminded of provision Article 27.3 of the sporting regulations. I have it right here up with me, and I'll read it out to you guys. 27.3 has very interesting ones because, to me, they contradicted the very same thing in the race director's notes, not to mention the fact that they didn't even follow this regulation, because the first one says, drivers must make every reasonable effort to use the track at all times and may not deliberately leave the track without a justifiable reason. So, if we just apply that provision to Hamilton or anybody else going off track in the race, they are violating 27.3 of that sporting regulation, meaning they should have either been, A, given a warning, or B, given a penalty. So it just contradicts the race director's notes, which is like, well, for the race guys, remember Article 27.3. Article 27.3 says you have to stay within the damn track limits. You can only leave if, let's say, you're pushed off track or you have some sort of a problem. But there's no justifiable reason here because they're leaving the track to try and gain an advantage. And Lewis and Valtteri and Max gained an advantage throughout the course of 30 laps by improving their lap time. Guys, if the drivers are going out there, they're going out there because they're trying to improve a lap time. A Formula One driver will not use that bit of the track if he doesn't think that it'll benefit him. So I'm with you, Tyler. I mean, I'm confused. I'm angry because this just doesn't make any sense, and they just contradict their own rules. They don't even apply their own rules.
Well, I'm glad you found the article that had it because, I mean, I couldn't find it. There's a lot to look through, though, so
Yeah.
I just must have missed it.
And I'll post that in the description of this video for people to go and read, and I'll tell you exactly which section is because I'll read the rest of it because there's sort of three parts that limits to track limits. So it's under 27, which is called driving, and then 27.3. Yeah, I know.
Oh my God.
27.3 is specifically for track limits. So the second one says drivers will be adjudged to have left the track if no part of the car remains in contact with it. And in the avoidance of doubt, any white lines defining the track edges are considered to be part of the track, but the curbs are not. So interesting. That's sort of a definition as to what track limits would be, right? And then the very last thing, which applies to what Verstappen did, should a car leave the track, their driver may rejoin. However, this is only be done when it is safe to do so without gaining any lasting advantage, which, of course he did because he gained the position. At the absolute discretion of the race director, a driver may be given the opportunity to give back the whole of any advantage he gained by leaving the track. So that is why Horner said that they had to give the position back because they would have been in direct violation of a sporting regulation. They would have directly disobeyed a race director's order, which probably would have carried a more stiffer penalty than, let's say, 5 seconds.
Yes, I was going to mention that because they were told on the radio to get the position back right away. And Max said, well, why didn't you just let me keep going? And I would have dealt with the 5-second penalty and, just, bridge that gap. I could have gone 5 seconds. And when he immediately said that, I thought, well, the FIA aren't going to give him a 5-second penalty. They're going to give him, they'll investigate until after the race. And then what they'll say is they'll give him whatever penalty that Hamilton was behind. So say Hamilton was behind 8 seconds and it would be a 10-second penalty. If Hamilton was behind 11 seconds, then it would be a 15-second penalty just to put him in second place. So I think even if Max did, just not give the place back, I think the FIA would have given whatever penalty to put Max in second place.
Shaker, how confused are you?
I feel like something very similar happened in Austria 2 years ago, but obviously it wasn't completely off the track. It was the opposite of Max being in the inside and Charles Leclerc going off track, and obviously, completely different situation. I do agree that Max should have given the position back because yes, he did go off track. But I honestly think that everybody should have gotten a time penalty, like to get like a millisecond or a second or whatever taken away from your time at the very end for the amount of times that you went off track. They have so many cameras on track that can literally tally each time that these cars went off track. They have all their cameras on all of these cars that they can tally every single time these cars went on track and be like, okay, 1 second, 2 second, let's take it off the initial time and however many times they got taken off. That should be the grid positions in the end.
You know what? I would much rather that, Shaker, than what the shit show that we saw at the end of the race. Like,
yeah, because at least it gives a fair time to every single person that went off track and every person that didn't go off track,
Right.
Yeah. I mean, just my personal opinion of the matter. I agree that it would not have been a 5-second penalty. It probably would have been 10 seconds at the end of it. Because then they would have gone back and be like, oh, well, Max went off this many times, so he's going to get a 10-second penalty because it was, he was already warned by his team was already warned. It's stupid is what I think it is.
Yeah, I would agree that Max should have given the place back as well. I don't think it was a legal overtake. It wasn't a legal overtake, which I hope that everyone can see that and agree on that. I'm sure there's some people who won't agree on that, but I don't know. You have to make the pass within the track limits. It wasn't in the track limits. I think it's pretty cut and dry there.
Yep. No, I agree. Um,
Well, I will say though, I think Max gave the position back in the wrong area.
That's right.
I think
I
think he should have gave it back on the main straight. Yeah, but even if he's like argued it for half a lap and then gave it back on the pit straight, where he could have tucked in behind and then re-overtook Hamilton, where the straight he gave it up on wasn't long enough for him to tuck in behind and then make another dive bomb. And then his tires got hot behind Lewis and he made that oversteer correction and that kind of really messed up the rest of his race.
But pretty crazy to see a extremely level-headed, mature Max Verstappen to, like you said, not even complain on team radio. Well, I mean, he did, but to just completely oblige. I mean, 2 years ago, he wouldn't have gave the position back at all, just like he did in Mexico a couple of years ago against Vettel and Ricciardo at that time. So a totally different Max Verstappen for 2021, but yeah, good for him.
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, a very mature Max Verstappen, even at his team radio at the very end, like he was angry that he lost the position, but it wasn't the infuriated Max that we usually see kind of, yelling a little bit on the team radio. He's like, I would have rather lost like that than Luke come in second like this. He was like, he'd rather make up the time and lose second than with the time lost than try to do what he did there. So I think you're very mature Max from this year. I think it's, in the end, it's going to help out Red Bull quite a lot because, hopefully we don't see a lot of those early mistakes that we saw a few years ago, and which I think every year we've seen an improvement on. So
in the end, I hope the FIA have learned a lesson, and that is to stick with the same track limits from FP1 to the end of the race. Yep. So hopefully that will come into effect at Imola in 3 weeks' time.
I think I'll be in Formula One by the time that happens, Tyler. I'm not holding up my hopes. And you know what the worst part, just to wrap this up, Michael Massey was even worse after the race because Hamilton said that they changed it mid-race. Verstappen was saying they were ultra confused. And Massey was like, no, we didn't. We had 2 people monitoring turn 4 track limits and everybody except one was respecting it. And I'm just like, well, what do you mean? So, I mean, who's lying? Is it the drivers? Is it the teams? Or is it...
No, it's 100% the FIA because we saw Valtteri and Lewis go off and use it all the time. So I don't know. I don't understand what they're doing. If they had 2 people watching it, they must be blind.
Yeah.
Like seriously.
100%. Okay, well, that's the track limit stuff. That was the negative things. But just to wrap up this episode, let's talk about what was the extreme positive and what was just a pleasure to watch. And that was Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton. And let's just give credit to where credit's due. Lewis Hamilton put on an exceptional drive, put his car on every single right bits of the track, was one of the things I don't think Hamilton gets enough credit of in terms of his driving skills is how smart he is in terms of a driver and his technical know-how. Notice how he didn't allow Verstappen any wiggle room going into turn 1 and essentially kind of baited him into overtaking him at turn 4, knowing all this track limit stuff and knowing that nature of the corner, if you want to overtake on the outside, you're going to have to go a little bit wide. And of course, Verstappen had that oversteer moment, which eventually led to him having to give up that position. So Hamilton drove extremely well on that used set of tires as well. I think Mercedes nailed the strategy as Red Bull didn't. I think that we saw in that first stint, Red Bull kind of was sleeping a little bit and didn't necessarily have the best strategy. But again, like I said, if Perez comes into play, I think that will help them. But overall, I just think it was so enjoyable to watch the both of them. And if we didn't have the controversy, it would have been extremely enjoyable, regardless of the fact we've seen Hamilton win quite enough in the last couple of years. But that's the battle that we want. And it looks like we're going to be able to get that throughout the whole season.
Yeah, and I don't even mind like Hamilton winning and Max coming second. Like I'm just happy it was a very close and exciting race in the end. I'll take that any day of the week right now. I mean, like you say, it shows how amazing of a driver Lewis is to be able to pick and choose when he's going to decide to get passed by to use it to his advantage, right? And I'm catching up on Drive to Survive, and I was rewatching the Mercedes German debacle from season 2, and I was watching that and I was thinking back to the race that just happened, thinking, it's amazing how good of a driver Lewis Hamilton is. I mean, in Germany, of course, he was very, very ill. Still got pole position during qualifying, although being very ill, and obviously just made that one mistake two mistakes, I guess, to spin out. But it just brought me back to the, like, how mentally in tune he is with his car and with the strategy the whole time. And we're not going to see a driver like him too often in the sport, one of the greatest of all time. So I think it'll be nice to enjoy the last few years that he's racing in Formula One, and it will be nice to see him maybe pass the torch to Max or to whoever is going to be the next world champion, and to see them battle it out. And if we get like we did during this last race for the next 22 races, man, it's going to be an awesome season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what he said at the end. He's like, Bono said, he still got it for an old man. Yeah, absolutely. It's just watching that race. I ended up rewatching the entire thing this morning. Just like you guys said, every time it came to defending and being on the offensive, Lewis is always on the right foot. He knows exactly what to do. His little bait in with Max, with the switch was fantastic to try to get him on the inside. And I think the other thing we have to realize is Red Bull, with Perez going out in the first, right before we started the formation lap, it kind of screwed up all of Red Bull's strategies that they would have had. So they had to adapt to a different strategy. And big kudos to Mercedes for, pouncing on that right away to realize that they need to go to a three-stop strategy to put Lewis up ahead. And even right at the very end, they knew either were going to lose out on points, putting Valtteri on the soft tires to get him the fastest lap for that extra point as well. So yeah, I think team strategies were fantastic today. I'm sure we'll be seeing more from Red Bull as we move on. So
kudos to Pirelli for bringing us tires that actually had some degrading in it, and we could see multiple pit stops and different strategies.
Yep.
That will be key for this season too, is making sure that the tires are in the right working range, and obviously managing the tires as well, which Mercedes seem to have done a good job with. But it's a good omen, I think, for the rest of the year. And interesting that the Honda Power as well held up very well. I think reliability might be a little bit of a concern, as obviously they had to replace, I believe it was the control electronics and the turbo on Perez's car just before the race, as they saw some sort of an issue that they couldn't figure out. So hopefully that they can get that sorted out, and that they won't have any more of those types of issues throughout the year. But they seem very, very quick in a straight line, more so than Mercedes, I would say. And then obviously very strong in the corners as well. So it's going to be extremely close. Imola will be interesting because I think it's obviously more downforce sensitive than Bahrain is. So I think that Red Bull should be strong there. Mercedes, I believe, will be good as there as well. And it's going to be exciting to see these two guys go after it, man. I think that it'll be interesting to see how aggressive Verstappen gets sort of later on into the season. I don't think he was maybe as aggressive as he could have been in this race, in terms of, let's say he didn't send a dive bomb in the last lap like he did in Monaco a couple years ago, for example. But I think he was very measured, and unfortunately wasn't able to get the move done legally anyways. But I still think that both of them were just at the top of their game, and it's what we want to see. So finally we got it. Now let's just hope it continues for 22 races, and that both of their teammates can also get involved in the fight too.
Yeah, I want to touch on Bottas quickly. And I was listening to his post-race radio. F1's putting out all the drivers who finished post-race radio, and it was really interesting because his engineer was saying how, Valtteri, I know you finished third, but you should be very happy about the pace you had. You had the best pace out of everyone on the track. And Valtteri said something along the lines of, we're way too conservative with our strategy. We need to be way more aggressive with what we do. We're too conservative. And his engineer said, you'll have a smile on your face when you see your pace. Which, like, if I was a driver and I heard that, I'd say, like, screw off. I still finished third.
Yeah.
But I found that very interesting from Valtteri, because I think he's starting to get sick of being on the wrong side of all these strategy calls, and is wanting to have a more aggressive strategy. We saw at the end of last year where he's like, put me on whenever Lewis isn't on, and the team was no, we can't do that. And then this 2 races later, Lewis goes on a different tire than what Valtteri was on, right? I forget what races those were, but that was a thing last year. So I really hope we see Valtteri push back and get some more strategy on his side. Because I think if he actually did get the same strategy as Lewis, he would have been up there challenging for a race win as well.
You haven't watched season 3 of Drive to Survive yet, eh?
I haven't.
Okay, so it's fuck you, Bottas, this year.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
We'll see how that works.
Yeah, I think he said it in the end of the season that it's fuck you, Bottas, this year. He's not sitting back this year anymore. So should be
love
interesting.
To whom it may concern.
Yeah. Well, and you're right, because his pace in that second stint was very good. He was closing not only on Verstappen, but Hamilton as well.
Yeah.
I think
he was the fastest.
100%. The complexion of that race, I think, would have changed had they not screwed his pit stop. So
Yep.
I think
Yes.
Valtteri's well within the right to be pissed off, but he's going to need to take things into his own hand. And first of all, it's going to need to start in qualifying, because if you're starting third, you're at least behind Hamilton, you're going to have to play second fiddle. I mean, he might have to anyway, because obviously we've seen in the past him qualify on pole and have to give up a win. But he needs to assert himself into that conversation by qualifying ahead of Lewis, and then in the race just not giving any inch, especially off the starts, trying to get his elbows out a little bit and go Nico Rosberg-esque in 2016 and try and rattle Hamilton a little bit that way. But other than that,
I think he should talk to Nico and get some advice on what he did to counteract the Lewis favoritism at Mercedes, because he's going to need to be just as aggressive as Nico and really push the limit on whether he's a teammate or fighting for a championship.
Yep, absolutely. It should be interesting to see how he does in the next couple of races, but definitely some unluck on his behalf. So, final one for me, really, and just a quick shout out before we wrap up here, is the rookie Yuki Tsunoda. First rookie in quite a long time, I think, actually, to score points on his debut. Unfortunately,
Is it Stoffel?
Yeah, that's right.
Stoffel Van Dorn?
Yes, when he replaced Alonso in Bahrain, actually, right here, interestingly enough. So yeah, he had a very good, strong race. Of course, was out-qualified by a stellar performance by Pierre Gasly. Unfortunately, Gasly had some front wing contact with Daniel Ricciardo, so he was out of play early on in the race. But Tsunoda did a fantastic job, had some excellent overtakes on one of his heroes, Fernando Alonso, which was very special for him, and a couple of other drivers as well. So we were talking about this in the preseason as well, just how impressed we were by Yuki Tsunoda, and very good that this has continued into the race as well. That was one of his ambitions and targets before the season, was to score points, and the team wanted him to score points as well. So the fact that he did it in his first race is a very positive start. Qualifying, he'll need to improve upon, of course, just a little bit, but it's super close in that midfield. It was really only a couple tenths in it between him and Q3, but excellent performance by the young Japanese star.
Yeah, I thought he was very impressive throughout the whole race, minus the first couple laps that he had. But other than that, he was very good. He was very impressive during qualifying. He was just putting up blistering laps and all that. So I know we said that we both thought that he needed another year in F2, but if he goes ahead and proves us wrong, then I'm here for it, because we always want to see drivers do well. And he's very aggressive on the radio. He swears a lot.
He
it's
does,
crazy.
yeah.
He's very aggressive on the radio, but he likes to talk. I was listening to his post-race interview, and he just kept talking and talking and talking during the interview. It was awesome to see a driver with English not his first language, but to be so passionate, just talking, and it seemed like a good guy wanting to talk about racing. So no, good for the young lad. He did very well, impressed me, and I think is the front runner for Rookie of the Year.
Without a doubt, and he's a great character as well. He kind of shows his personality every now and again, but typically when you learn English for the first time, you learn all the swear words first. So that's probably why he's so proficient in that regard. But I like that. I like that he's that fiery already in his first season, in his first race, his first weekend. Really, we don't necessarily see that from some of the rookies, so that's great. And Ross Brawn actually was just reading earlier today saying that he's one of the most talented rookies they've had in recent years. So that's quite a big compliment, considering some of the rookies like Verstappen, for example, and Charles Leclerc, who've recently entered. So big things expected from Yuki, and he's certainly delivering so far. So that's about it for me on the 2021 Bahrain Grand Prix. Did you guys have any other comments or things that you noticed that you wanted to talk about?
Shaker, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
Can you guys hear me?
There we go.
Now you can hear you. You're muted on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But you could still hear. You could still reply though.
It still responded. Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're doing.
Okay,
That's
Kimmy. Yeah, nice one.
Uh,
I didn't clue in there. Nice one, guy. Nice one.
but yeah, I think there was one thing I wanted to add, but I just got distracted by that.
Fair enough.
If no one understands what Shaker's referencing to, it's listen to Kimi Raikkonen's team radio, because Raikkonen was asking if they could hear him, and his engineer just kept saying, "No, we can't hear you," but like in perfect like sync with when he was done talking. So I don't know. It was really weird. I don't know if they were playing a joke on him or what.
I don't know.
Yes, sorry, it was on that on Yuki Tsunoda. His overtake on Kimi Raikkonen was also fantastic. That's why I was doing that. I was like, I was gonna lead this to something. But yeah, his overtake on that was fantastic. I think Kimi even said he's like, oh, okay, he's gonna make a push. Okay, no chance. So like it was a beautiful overtake. It literally gave Kimi no room to try and defend or anything there. I know it has to do a lot with pace with the Alpha this year, but I mean, Yuki's just amazing start to the season. You could see the aggressiveness. I think if Pierre Gasly, we don't know where he would have landed, but I think he's the only new driver in a team to outshine his teammate in terms of being a new driver and them having an old driver.
Right.
I think you're right.
But again, that's just Pierre Gasly with that incident that he had. We don't know the full circumstances. But for his first race, did I do a little bit better than his teammate as a rookie driver is very, very well done.
Absolutely. And the other new teammate, which Daniel Ricciardo wanted to give a special shout out as well to Lando Norris in P4, who quietly had a fantastic weekend and a fantastic race as well. They had a very good battle between the two. Ricciardo and Norris did early on in the race, which was excellent, clean driving between the two, which is kind of exactly what I expect from Ricciardo especially, and Norris. So I think they're going to work really well together. McLaren definitely at the moment are the third best team, and I think that they've got some decent pace advantage over their rivals. And who knows, maybe in some tracks they'll be able to try and at least push Mercedes and Red Bull. I still think that they're off from that, but I think they'll be trying to knock on the door of some podium finishes this year. But I just want to say Norris had a fantastic race.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he really did. And I was going to just touch on, because in my prediction I have Aston Martin finishing third in the constructor standings, and they seem to be half decent throughout the race, but they really struggled on the hard tires. I don't know what it was. Their setup wasn't good for hard tires, but they'll have to get that sorted out for the next races. And this wouldn't be a Canadian podcast if we didn't touch on the Canadian drivers. So I just want to touch on that quickly before we wrap up. Lance Stroll had a decent race. Was 5th, 6th, 7th throughout most of the race, and then got on those hard tires and did not have any pace at all, really. Got passed by Tsunoda on the second to last lap for 9th, and so he ended up finishing 10th. And Nicholas Latifi, a tough race for Nicholas. Unfortunately, for Williams in general, Russell wasn't really too much of a factor during the race either, which is too bad from Williams. They seem to have better pace than what they did last year in terms of where they are on the grid. I think they have Haas beat, but there's still a gap there to Alfa Romeo, who was a lot quicker than what I thought they would be. They really impressed me in this weekend. So hopefully Williams can pull their socks up and get something there for Russell and Latifi. So we'll see going forward. But yeah, it's going to be tough for Williams and for Haas to try and move up the grid a little bit, because there's some teams that were a lot better than what I thought they would be.
100%. And overall, the grid just seems a lot closer than it even was last year. So I think that, as we stated many times, that battle in the midfield is going to be extremely close. And it was brilliant to see in qualifying as we were live just how small the gaps were between all the teams, and really from 1 through 15, it was incredibly close. So small margins are going to make the big difference in 2021. And teams like Aston Martin and Alpine, for example, they have a lot of work cut out for them to match some of their rivals and to try and find some pace in their cars. But it's only race one, boys, and I think we're in for a pretty storming season. And I think if you guys don't have anything more, then that will be it for the 2021 Bahrain Grand Prix.
Got a big lull until Imola, so I guess get your Drive to Survive in and bridge the gap until Imola.
Yeah.
100%. And I'm sure that we'll be coming out with some sort of content between now and Imola. It's about 3 weeks, actually. By the time this podcast comes out, obviously it'll be a little bit shorter, 2.5 weeks or so. But it's not bad. It gives us a little bit of a break in terms of what was a very busy preseason. And then after April, really, it's going to really turn up to 10 in terms of intensity for the F1 schedule. So it's a quiet it's going to be a quiet April. But I think that Imola race, the fact that we get a 3-week break, I think is almost nice because we're just going to really build the hype after what was such an exciting race here in Bahrain. So I can't wait to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Chris.
All right, well then that will do it then for episode 102 of the Backmarkers F1 Show podcast. If you made it this far, thank you very much for listening or watching wherever you're watching, either on YouTube or listening on any of your favorite podcast apps and platforms. If you want to support our channel, reminder that those links can be found in the description below. You can donate to us directly via buymeacoffee.com or via PayPal. Any donations at all or any support would be greatly appreciated. If you can't do that, no problem. Our content will always be free, or at the very least, just subscribe to us on YouTube and also follow us on social media as well, as that would be greatly appreciated. I'll leave the final word then to you guys. Any more thoughts then on Bahrain Grand Prix or anything in the upcoming F1 world?
No, not for me. I'm just pumped to see what the rest of the season's going to be. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen this year. 23 races. So far, it looks like it's going to be one of the best F1 seasons in recent memory.
Yeah, I'm super looking forward to the season. The first race kind of brought out a lot, so it's, these 3 weeks are going to be a little bit slow, waiting for it to come up. But yeah, very, very excited for this season and what's to come from what we've seen. So,
and I will say I've met a lot of people that are getting into F1 this year because of the Drive to Survive seasons. And I'm really excited to see them jump into F1 this season, because it's not going to be one of those lull seasons. I think it's going to be a really interesting season. So it's awesome to see new people getting into the sport, and a perfect year for them to do it.
Couldn't agree more. Can't wait to see what happens this year, and can't wait to have you guys along with us here on the Backmarkers F1 Show channel. For Tyler McDonald and Shaker Barty, thanks for watching today's Zoom edition of the podcast. Hopefully within the next couple of months, we'll have a more physical location set up at a new studio, and we'll all be able to join back together again in the same room for this podcast. But until then, we do with what we can, and we hope that you enjoyed our coverage and our thoughts on the race. Of course, drop your own down below in the comment section, and we'll try to reply to as many as we can in the next couple of weeks before Imola. Until then, guys, I'm Chris Cato. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care.